Hello everyone. My name is Sunman Hong. I'm teaching at Yonsei University in Korea. Today I'll present my paper titled Electoral Competition, Transparency and Open Government Data. I'll keep my presentation short. So the research question of this study is this. Why do local governments share their data with the public? What is the government's incentive? Do they expect some benefits for actively engaging in open government data initiatives? Uh, in this study, we explain how political incentive is one of the underlying reasons for governments to follow adaptive governance. Here, I define adaptive governance as governments actively engaging in open government and transparency initiatives. And here, local governments may perceive some political benefits in actively adapting to the social norms for improved government transparency. And I saw that policymakers may also expect some potentially significant costs resulting from open data, as transparency can sometimes backfire and threaten the interests of policymakers. So the key logic of this study is this. So I saw that policymakers weigh the expected benefits and cost of adaptation. Here, adaptation again is engaging in open data practices. So policymakers who face periodic elections, public elections, expect to be benefited from improving government transparency and becoming more responsive to citizens' open data requests, as the practice may help them gain public support. These benefits may be increasingly critical in districts where where fierce electoral competition exists. I therefore hypothesize that a greater electoral competition leads to adaptive governance, which is measured by local governments' greater responsiveness to citizens' open data requests. So I ended up with these three hypotheses. The first is a greater level of electoral competition is likely to be associated with more active participation of local governments in open data initiatives. This is because local governments perceive greater benefits from doing so. And the second hypothesis, left-leaning, more liberal local governments would more actively participate in open data initiatives than right-leaning, more conservative local governments. This hypothesis come from the various from past studies findings. Previous studies, especially based on the U.S., um, conclude that left-leaning local governments tend to more actively engage in open data initiatives. I just want to test those results in the context of Korean local governments. And the third, a greater level of administrative capacity is likely to be associated with more participation, more active participation by local governments in open data initiatives. This is my third hypothesis, and I have all three hypotheses tested in this study. So let me briefly explain where my data come from. The evidence reported in this study comes from Korean local government's open data practices during the 10-year period between 2007 and 2016. So the dependent variable of this study is the outcomes of open data practices in local governments. Specifically, we use the proportion of citizens' requests that are addressed by sharing data out of the total number of citizen requests. And the second dependent variable is the proportion of citizen requests that are responded to within 24 hours out of the total number of citizen requests. So if these two variables have high values, I interpreted the evidence as the local government's active engagement with open data requests. Then I have three treatment variables. First is the level of political competition. Second is data on local politicians' partisan affiliations. And third, the level of local government's administrative capacity. So all these three treatment variables are directly related to the three hypotheses that I explained in the previous slide. Results. These are the results. Overall, the first and third hypothesis is supported uh, in my data. As you can see here, uh, the variable, the coefficient of political competition and administrative capacity are all statistically significant, but the coefficients of partisan affiliations are not significant at all. Um, so uh, I could not conclude that left-leaning local governments tend to more actively engage in open data initiatives. Conclusion. Uh, we find supports for the hypothesis that greater political competition leads to greater government transparency and openness. This finding may indicate that one of the primary benefits policymakers perceive from improving transparency is to gain public support. We also find the importance of administrative capacity. The implementation of open data initiatives requires a substantial investment of resource on the part of governments, and organizations lacking those resources cannot actively respond to citizen requests. So we could see that administrative capacity is a very important factor uh, for to push local governments to engage in open data requests. Third, evidence indicates that political competition and administrative capacity are complements. The impact of political competition on government transparency and openness is greater in localities with strong administrative capacities. So the interaction term, the, the interaction term of political competition and administrative capacity was statistically significant. But we failed to find strong evidence that the partisan affiliation of local governments has any impact on how governments respond to citizens' open data requests. The last result, uh, the fact that we could not find support for the second hypothesis, was the main difference from the findings, the previous results reported using US data. Okay, thank you very much for listening.